Okay, so we want to make sure that we study for Friday 11/22. All right, integumentary system is skin, hair, nails, glands. Yesterday we did talk about the two major components of skin as a success criteria. We called the skin the cutaneous membrane, and then we called the hair, nails, and glands the accessory structures, but I'm just going to leave it like this, okay? Functions of the integumentary system. So one, you should have protection down. That's a biggie. The skin is also important for temperature regulation. Didn't I come up with a little like mnemonic device? Do you remember these or no? Do you remember it? Because I don't. It must have been a good one. Also, nutrients, synthesis and storage of nutrients. Protect the skin now, everybody. Very good. Thank you. Um, that helps me with the other S, which is sensitivity or sensory. I think I put sensory reception. And then the last one, everybody, E, excretion and secretion. Q. I can erase these. Okay, all right, so A is pointing at the uppermost layer of the skin, which is the epidermis. B is pointing at the layer underneath that, dermis, so you will see this diagram on Friday. C is the hypodermis or subcutaneous layer. All right, D is the top layer, the upper layer of the dermis, which is called the papillary layer. Okay. E is pointing to the reticular layer of the dermis. F, excuse me, F is supposed to be pointing at areolar tissue, loose connective tissue. And G is supposed to be pointing, oh, I'm sorry, my fault. F is, so on here it's kind of hard to see, but the line actually comes up all the way here to this thing, which is the hair follicle. And then G is pointing right in here to areolar tissue. H is just pointing at these things that are running through here, which are just nerve fibers. And I is pointing at just adipose tissue, that's fat. J is pointing at this coiled up set of tubes here. This is going to be a sweat gland. Yep. And K is pointing at this gland that is on the side of the hair follicle. So if you remember that hair follicles, hair when it comes out can be oily, that's because of these glands that are attached to the side of the hair follicle. This oil secretion is called sebum. These are called sebaceous glands. All right. L is pointing at this muscle that actually attaches to the hair follicle. And this is called the erector pili muscle. And that's what contracts when we're cold. It's what causes the hairs to stand up. It's what causes goosebumps. All right. And M is pointing at dermal papillae. So that's an easy way, by the way, to tell where the epidermis and dermis meet, is where the waves are. So you see how it's kind of wavy? Like that. And so that's the separation between epidermis and dermis. And the part of the dermis that comes up in that wave, that's referred to as a dermal papillae. You could look at the other side, the epidermis, the part that comes down, they call those epidermal ridges. Both of those are what make our fingerprints. Okay, and then I had you guys add a couple. I wanted these together, which were labeled N. And for that, I just want you to know blood vessels. You could do arteries and veins, but our quizzes and stuff are going to be in black and white, so it's hard to tell the difference. But so N, just put blood vessels. And you can see how those blood vessels do run up through the dermis because, like we mentioned before, the dermis is vascular, right? Means it has blood vessels, it has blood flow. They do not run up into the epidermis, though, because the epidermis is avascular. The other one I had you label was O up here. So this part of the hair that you see is called the hair shaft. Okay. And I had you put this thing for P. And so on the sweat gland, the tube that carries the sweat towards the surface is called this is letter P, sweat gland duct. Okay, that's P. And then one more is this thing here where it opens onto the surface is called, this is Q, it's called a pore. Or sweat pore. Okay. P is sweat gland duct. And is blood vessels. Okay, so number one says draw an arrow that shows the direction of movement of cells as they age. So they're going to start from the lowest layer and they're going to make their way outward. Okay, so you should have an arrow going that direction like that. So we are going to now label the different numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for different layers of the epidermis. So the lowest one, could you tell that on your paper? Yeah. So 1 is the deepest layer, which we call the stratum germinativum, also known as the stratum basale. Okay. Next, we're going to get the stratum spinosum, and then we're going to get the stratum granulosum. And this has 5 layers to the epidermis, which tells me that this is thick skin. Okay, so in thick skin, we have this special layer called the stratum lucidum, and that would be absent if it wasn't thick skin. Okay, and the outermost layer is called the stratum corneum. What layer of the epidermis has fully keratinized dead cells? This could be lucidum, but it really is going to be our outermost that we think of. These dead cells are flaking off. They are good for protection. That is going to be the stratum corneum. And number 4, what layer of the epidermis contains the pigment melanin? It's produced by those melanocytes, which are found in the stratum germinativum, aka stratum basale. All right. And number 5, in what layer of the epidermis is the protein keratin produced the most? Protein, tough. It's a tough protein, keratin. Think, I always think of like rice grains, grainy. Stratum granulosum. Okay, so that's everything for your quiz Friday. All right.